In the late 1930s, air travel was at an all-time high. However, passenger aircraft of the period were limited in the number of passengers they could carry and how far they could take them. During that time, Howard Hughes controlled a small, struggling airline, TWA. Hughes had always been a man who thought big and had some ideas about designing a large, fast, and reliable passenger-carrying airline. With an aircraft like this, Hughes felt that he could make TWA the leader in air travel. In 1935, Howard Hughes had piloted his way around the world in record time, 3 days, 19 hours. His aircraft was a Lockheed 14 Super Electra. With his confidence in the Lockheed Company, Hughes went to them and worked with their designers to develop a 4-engine, pressurized aircraft capable of carrying 40 to 60 passengers between Los Angeles and New York in 8 to 9 hours, non-stop. This meant that the plane would have to travel at least 300 miles per hour, faster than some fighter aircraft of the period. When the plans and ideas were put together, the Lockheed Constellation was born. Later affectionately known as the Connie, it became one of the classic-looking aircraft of all time. The Connie featured 4 huge 2,200 horsepower Wright Cyclone engines with large, slow-turning Hamilton propellers. The large propellers meant that higher ground clearance was needed, resulting in a very tall landing gear. Without a doubt, the most recognizable trait of the Constellation was its triple tail configuration. While the designers agreed that a single, tall tail would be more efficient, the airplane would not be able to fit into any of the standard hangars of the time. The triple tail was used, and the Constellation would be forever instantly recognized. Unfortunately for Mr. Hughes, World War II started, and the first Constellation completed went to the military. The Air Force was so impressed with the airplane that it ordered 260. One would later become the first Air Force One to be used by President Eisenhower. The war ended, and TWA finally got their long-awaited Constellation. On February 15, 1946, the first passenger service of the Constellation, Star of California, took place. It was a non-stop flight from LA to New York, and Hughes turned it into the ultimate publicity coup. Hughes put together an entourage of the top Hollywood movie stars for the inaugural flight. Names like Edward G. Robinson, Linda Darnell, Paulette Goddard, William Powell, and a host of others boarded the flight. As an added surprise, Howard Hughes climbed into the left seat and did the flying as captain. The flight was to publicize TWA's scheduled LA to New York flights, which would start the following month. TWA was now the leader in airline passenger service. The Constellations ruled the skies through the 1950s until the jet-powered aircraft began to overshadow them. Out of the 856 Constellations manufactured, only a few are left flying today. No longer commercially feasible, a few private owners and groups have restored aircraft and take them to selected air shows around the country. One group, called Save a Connie, tours this Super G model. People can see her fly and tour her luxurious cabin. After World War II, many Connies were used during the Berlin airlift. This privately owned Connie still flies in the colors of the Military Air Transport Service. One man who has dedicated his life to saving Connies is Maurice Roundy, who owns 3 Super Connies. This one resided in Sanford, Florida. This model was the last model built. Called the Starliner, it was once flown by the German airline Lufthansa. It ended up in Sanford when it developed problems while being flown to Maine, where Maurice keeps the other 2. While at Sanford, there was no opportunity for anyone to view this magnificent aircraft. Time began to take its toll, and the tie-down fees began to add up. Maurice contacted Kermit Weeks, creator of Fantasy of Flight, to see how they could work together for each other's benefit. By bringing the Connie to Fantasy of Flight, visitors would be able to view the historic aircraft. The Connie could park for free. Although the trip from Sanford to Fantasy of Flight was only 55 miles, weeks of preparation were necessary. The aircraft had not flown for many years, and all the systems necessary for safe flight had to be checked. After the engines had been inspected and minor maintenance performed, it was time for startup. As with any radial engine that sits for a long time, oil collects in the cylinders and in the exhaust. Upon startup, smoke will billow out of the exhaust as the stacks get hot and all the oil burns out. Once the engines had settled in and everything looked good, Kermit taxied the Constellation, checking steering, engines, and braking systems. Maurice called upon Captain Frank Lang from Tucson, Arizona to fly the airplane over. A longtime Connie pilot, Captain Lang has flown virtually all models of Constellations built. Weeks and Roundy met with Captain Lang to coordinate and plan the trip. Since the aircraft had sat for a number of years and a full inspection to certified status was not feasible, it would be flown under a ferry permit issued by the FAA for the short, one-time flight. With all in place, the fuel truck arrived to put the minimum amount of fuel necessary to safely make the flight. The Connie can hold almost 10,000 gallons of fuel, but you won't need that much today. As a safety precaution, Kermit would lead the Constellation over to Fantasy of Flight in his Beechcraft Baron. With the engine checks complete, the Connie was ready for takeoff. Throttles were slowly pushed forward. Lightly loaded and with almost 9,000 horsepower, she soon lifted off the runway and was heading for her new home. As the Connie radios were marginal, Kermit coordinated with air traffic control. This allowed the Connie crew to concentrate on flying the airplane and safely monitoring the systems. The chase plane could also visually inspect the aircraft for any problems should any arise. Kermit would do the navigation. Since the flight would be fairly short, Captain Lang had made the decision to fly the Connie over with the landing gear down. This would be one less thing to worry about and possibly go wrong. In case of an emergency and the loss of one or more engines, Captain Lang had the option and capability to retract the gear and decrease drag. As the airplanes approached Fantasy of Flight, Captain Lang decided to make a practice approach. Understand that this all happened in November of 2001, only 2 months after the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Centers. Several citizens, noticing the large, low-flying aircraft, had called the sheriff in fear of what might be going on. Upon hearing that it was near Fantasy of Flight and Polk City, the sheriff put their fears to rest, knowing that Kermit was bringing in another aircraft. Content with the environment, Captain Lang lined up the Connie with the Fantasy of Flight runway, dropped the flaps, and slowly throttled back. To the amazement of onlookers on Interstate 4, the huge aircraft descended over the power lines and traffic. As the Connie touched down, Captain Lang applied reverse thrust to the engines and had the airplane stopped in just over half of the 5,000-foot runway. Taxiing into her new home at Fantasy of Flight, one could sense that this grand lady of the air would be much happier in these new surroundings, living out her days in an environment that reflected the period and times when she was queen of the skies, and knowing that visitors would now be able to marvel at and admire her sleek and elegant lines.